The illegal auction in Desert Wells erupted into chaos as two men bid against each other for 3 black sisters being sold by their desperate stepmother. Jonah Rourke, a bitter former Union soldier turned rancher, wasn't there to buy people, but to stop his enemy Marcus Webb from destroying more lives. When Jonah won the bid with his life savings, he faced an impossible choice that would either damn him or force him to confront the trauma that had turned him into an angry, broken man. What Jonah decided to do next would shock the entire Arizona territory and change 4 lives forever. The dust kicked up in swirls around the makeshift auction platform. Desert Wells baked under the Arizona sun, its single street crowded with men who had come to buy what should never be sold. Jonah Rourke stood at the back of the crowd, his weathered hands clenched at his sides. He had not come here for this. He had come to stop Marcus Webb from buying the Clearwater Creek water rights. But Webb stood near the front now, bidding on 3 young women instead. The auctioneer's voice cut through the desert heat. His words made Jonah's stomach turn. This was wrong. Everything about this moment was wrong. On the platform, 3 sisters stood with their backs straight, despite their circumstances. The eldest had teacher's hands, soft but strong. The middle sister carried herself like someone who knew healing. The youngest clutched a small sewing kit against her chest. Behind them, a woman in faded calico dress wept silently. Constance Hammond, the one who had brought them here. Jonah had seen Constance around town before. Mixed heritage, trying to make her way in a world that had no patience for people like her. Now she was selling her own family to survive. The eldest sister's eyes found Jonah's across the crowd. Her gaze held no plea for rescue, only defiance. Her lips moved, barely audible above the shouting bidders. "We won't be your property, no matter who wins." Something stirred in Jonah's chest, a memory, half buried under years of grief and whiskey. He had seen those eyes before, not hers, but eyes like them. Proud eyes that refused to break even when everything else did. Webb raised his hand again. 200. The crowd murmured. That was serious money for 3 people. Webb's money came from stolen land and broken contracts. Money that rightfully belonged to families he had cheated. Jonah thought of his own farm, lost to Webb's legal schemes 6 months ago. His cattle scattered. His future buried under fraudulent debt claims. Webb had taken everything from him with nothing but paperwork and bought judges. 250, Jonah called out. Heads turned. Webb's eyes narrowed when he spotted Jonah. A cold smile spread across the land speculator's face. Well now, Rourke. Didn't expect to see you here. Thought you were broke. Jonah said nothing. He kept his eyes on the 3 sisters. The middle one was staring at him now with a strange expression. Recognition, maybe. But that was impossible. He had never seen her before. Had he? 275, Webb countered. The bidding war began in earnest. Other men dropped out quickly. This was between Webb and Jonah now. Everyone knew it. Jonah's hand went to his shirt pocket. $300. Every cent he had left in the world. His last hope of starting over somewhere else. 300, he said. The crowd fell silent. Webb's smile faltered. That was more money than most men in Desert Wells saw in a year. Going once, the auctioneer called. Webb looked ready to bid higher, then stopped. His eyes calculated something Jonah could not read. The smile returned colder than before. Going twice. Let him have them, Rourke. You have no idea what you're buying yourself. Sold to Jonah Rourke for $300. The words hit Jonah like a physical blow. He had done it. But what exactly had he done? He had come here to hurt Webb, not to buy human beings. Now, 3 lives depended on decisions he was not prepared to make. The crowd began to disperse. Webb approached, still wearing that dangerous smile. Enjoy your purchase, Rourke. When you're ready to sell, I'll give you half what you paid. They're not for sale. Everything's for sale. You'll learn. Webb walked away, but his threat lingered in the desert air like smoke. Jonah approached the platform where the sisters waited. Up close he could see the fear they had hidden from the crowd, but the defiance remained too. Constance Hammond stepped forward with the money in her shaking hands. Tears had carved tracks through the dust on her face. They're good girls. They don't deserve what's happened to them. Then why sell them? Constance's voice broke. Because what's coming for them is worse. She pressed a folded paper into his hand along with the bill of sale. They're freedom papers. Keep them safe. The, eldest sister spoke. Grace Hammond. These are my sisters, Mercy and Hope. Jonah nodded. Names made it real. Made them people instead of property, though they had always been people. He had just paid $300 to prove it. We need to go, he said. The wagon ride out of Desert Wells passed in uncomfortable silence. 3 sisters, 1 broken man, and a choice that none of them fully understood yet. 5 miles from town, the middle sister finally spoke. You saved my family once before. Jonah turned to look at her. Mercy, the healer. Do you remember the Clearwater Creek raid? Images flashed through Jonah's mind. Union blue. Confederate gray. Smoke and screams. A family trapped in a burning cabin. A bullet that sent him spinning into darkness. His hand went unconsciously to the scar above his left ear. The doctors had said he was lucky to live. They had not mentioned what the injury might cost him. You were a soldier, Mercy continued. You pulled us out of that cabin. You saved us. The memories came flooding back now. Not just the raid, but everything after. The hospital. The long recovery. The day he learned his own family had died while he was unconscious. I remember, he said quietly. Grace and Hope were staring at him now too. The angry cowboy who had bought them was not who they thought he was. He was not who he thought he was either. The sun was setting behind them, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. Ahead lay Jonah's ranch and choices that would define all their futures. What happens now? Hope asked. Jonah considered the question as the wagon wheels turned through the dust. 3 years ago he had saved this family from raiders. Today he had bought them at an illegal auction. Tomorrow he would have to decide what kind of man he wanted to be. Now we find out what freedom actually means. The ranch house sat like a weathered bone against the red mesa. 3 days of desert wind had scoured the silence between them raw. Jonah had given the sisters the main house while he slept in the barn. Nobody spoke about what came next. Grace swept the front porch for the 3rd time that morning. The dust always returned, like thoughts you tried to bury. Mercy tended Jonah's injured mare in the stable. The horse had taken a stone in her hoof weeks ago. Infection had set in. Most men would have put her down by now. Hope sat by the kitchen window, stitching torn curtains with thread she had found in a drawer. Her hands moved with practiced precision, making broken things whole again. Jonah chopped wood behind the house. The rhythm of the axe had been constant since dawn. Split. Stack. Split. Stack. Each blow driving something deeper underground. The sun climbed higher. The silence stretched thinner. Grace finally set down her broom. She walked to where Jonah worked, his shirt soaked with sweat despite the morning chill. We need to talk. Jonah buried the axe in the chopping block, wiped his hands on his pants. The conversation had been coming for 3 days. You saved us at Clearwater Creek, Grace said, but you don't remember us. I remember enough. Do you remember what you told my father? Jonah looked at her. Grace had teacher's eyes. They saw through things. You told him that good people don't get to stay good when the world goes bad. That we all have to choose what we're willing to become. The words echoed in Jonah's chest. He had said that right before the raiders came back with reinforcements, right before the bullet that took away 2 years of his life. Your father, what happened to him? Died of fever the winter after the raid. We lost everything. Had to go live with Constance. Mercy appeared from the stable, wiping her hands, on a rag. The mare followed her, walking sound for the first time in weeks. "She's going to be fine," Mercy said. "Just needed someone to clean out the poison." Hope joined them from the house. 4 people standing in a circle, like they were praying or preparing for battle. "What do you want from us?" Grace asked. The question hung in the desert air. Jonah had been asking himself the same thing for 3 days. "I don't know." "That's honest, at least," Hope said quietly. Jonah looked at each of them. 3 sisters who had lost everything but still carried themselves like they owned the world. "I could give you money for passage, help you get to California, or back east." "Run away, you mean?" Grace said. "Start over. We've been starting over our whole lives." Mercy stepped closer to the group. Her voice carried the weight of someone who had seen too much death. "Or we could stay, work the ranch, build something here." The words settled over them like dust after wind. Staying meant risking everything Webb had threatened. Running meant abandoning the first real chance they had found. If you stay, you work as partners, not servants. You earn shares in whatever we build. Grace's eyes narrowed. "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm tired of running from good choices." Hope fingered the hem of her dress. "A nervous habit from childhood." "What about the law? People like Webb? Let them come." The afternoon brought visitors. Sheriff Morrison rode up with 2 deputies, their horses kicking up dust clouds that could be seen for miles. Jonah met them at the property line. The sisters watched from the house. "Jonah," Morrison said. He was a decent man caught in indecent times. "Heard you made some kind of purchase in Desert Wells." "Heard right. Webb's been asking questions. Says you might be planning something unwise." "Webb says, a lot of things." Morrison shifted in his saddle. His eyes went to the house where 3 faces watched from the window. "Those girls teaching the local children?" "Grace taught school back east. Good at it. Some folks might not like that idea. Some folks don't like a lot of ideas." The sheriff studied Jonah's face. They had known each other for years. Morrison had been there the day Jonah lost his farm to Webb's legal schemes. "My boy's been struggling with his letters," Morrison said finally. "Wife's been worried about it. Grace could help with that. Might bring him by sometime." The deputies looked confused. This was not the conversation they had expected. Webb also mentioned something about weapons. Said you might be arming folks. Jonah's hand rested easy on his gun belt. Not threatening, just ready. "Every man has a right to protect what's his." "And what's yours exactly?" "This ranch. These people. That's all." Morrison nodded slowly. He had gotten what he came for. Information. Intent. A measure of the man Jonah had become. "Keep it peaceful, Jonah, for everyone's sake." After the sheriff left, Grace approached Jonah on the porch. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting everything in shades of gold and shadow. "You stood up to them. They weren't here to cause trouble, just to understand." "And Webb? Webb's different. He'll be back." Grace sat on the porch steps. For the first time since the auction, she looked tired. "At Clearwater Creek, after you pulled us from that cabin, you told my father something else." Jonah waited. "You said that sometimes the only way to save something is to be willing to lose it." That night, Mercy found Jonah in the barn. He was checking the mare's hoof by lamplight. "She's healing clean," Mercy said. "No infection left." "You did good work." "My father taught me. Said healing was about cleaning out the poison and giving healthy things room to grow." Jonah looked up from the horse. Mercy's face was half hidden in shadow. "People can heal the same way," she said, "if they let themselves." She left him alone with the horses and the lamplight. Outside, wind moved through the desert like breath, through sleeping lungs. Hope appeared in the barn doorway an hour later. Grace is setting up a school in the old storage room. Says she'll teach any child who wants to learn. Good. Some people won't like it. Some people don't like anything that might make the world better. Hope stepped into the lamplight. In her hands, she held a shirt she had mended. Jonah's shirt, torn during the wood chopping. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked. Jonah took the shirt. Hope's stitches were nearly invisible. Perfect repair work. "Because 3 years ago I saved your family and then forgot about it. This time, I want to remember." The next morning brought news that would change everything. A rider arrived at dawn with word that territorial marshals were asking questions in Desert Wells. Webb had convinced someone in authority that Jonah Rourke was building an army. The sisters gathered in the kitchen. Jonah stood by the window, watching the horizon. "We could still leave," Hope said quietly. "We could still fight," Grace countered. Mercy placed her hands flat on the table, healer's hands, steady and sure. "Or we could do something they don't expect." Jonah turned from the window. "What's that?" "We could succeed." 6 months changed everything. Grace's school grew from 3 children to 15. They came in the early mornings when parents thought nobody would notice. White children sat next to Apache children, all of them learning letters that could reshape their futures. Hope's sewing brought customers from 3 towns over. Her hands could make a dress that turned heads at church socials. Word spread faster than wildfire about the seamstress who worked magic with thread. Mercy rode between ranches like a circuit preacher, carrying medicine instead of sermons. She had saved Morrison's boy from pneumonia, delivered Mrs. Henderson's baby when the town doctor was too drunk to stand, stitched up the Apache trader who got kicked by his horse. The ranch hummed, with purpose now. People came seeking things they couldn't find elsewhere. Education, healing, beauty, hope. Webb watched it all from his office in Desert Wells. Jonah found Grace in the schoolroom after the children left one afternoon. She was writing lessons. On a slate board, her teacher's handwriting neat and precise. "Mrs. Crawford pulled her boy out today," Grace said without turning around. "Why?" "Said she didn't want him learning alongside Apache children." Jonah leaned against the doorframe. The late sun slanted through the windows, painting everything golden. Her choice. "Is it?" Grace set down her chalk. "When fear makes all your choices for you." Hope appeared in the doorway behind Jonah, her arms full of fabric samples from her newest commission. "The territorial governor's wife wants a dress for the Christmas social. Heard about my work all the way in Tucson." "That's good business," Jonah said. "That's dangerous business," Grace corrected. "Important people notice you, important enemies follow." Mercy rode in just as the sun touched the mountains. Her medical bag looked lighter. She had left most of her supplies with families who needed them more than they could pay. The 4 of them gathered on the front porch as evening settled over the desert. A ritual now. The end of each day bringing them together to measure what they had built. "Webb came by the Morrison place today," Mercy said, "asking questions about our school." Grace's jaw tightened. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that make people nervous about bringing their children here." Hope folded her hands in her lap. Always neat, always composed, but her knuckles showed white in the fading light. "Maybe we're pushing too hard too fast." "Maybe we're not pushing hard enough," Grace replied. They sat in silence as the first stars appeared. Desert wind carried the scent of sage and distant rain. Storm weather coming. The next morning brought Sheriff Morrison and news that changed everything. "Jonah." Morrison dismounted slowly. He looked like a man carrying bad tidings. "We need to talk." They walked away from the house. The sisters watched from the kitchen window. "Webb's been busy. Got himself some friends in the territorial capital." "What kind of friends?" "The kind with badges in federal authority." Jonah felt something cold settle in his chest. "What are they saying?" "That you're running an illegal settlement, teaching children without proper certification, practicing medicine without license, harboring fugitives." The Hammond sisters aren't fugitives. Webb says their freedom papers are forged. The lie hit Jonah like a physical blow. Those papers were legitimate. Constance had made sure of that before the auction. You know that's not true. I know it, you know it. But federal marshals don't know it, and Webb's got lawyers who can make truth look like lies until a judge sorts it out. Morrison kicked at the dust with his boot, a man trying to find solid ground in shifting sand. There's more. Webb's filed claims on your water rights, says you defaulted on debts when you bought those girls. That's impossible. Nothing's impossible when you have enough money and the right connections. A horse appeared on the horizon, single rider coming fast. As it got closer, Jonah recognized the horse but not the rider. Constance Hammond pulled up in a cloud of dust. She looked like she had been riding hard for days. Where are my sisters? Grace stepped out onto the porch. Her face went pale when she saw Constance. You came back. I never left the territory. Been working undercover for the Freedmen's Bureau. The words hit the group like thunder. Constance dismounted, her legs shaky from the long ride. I sold you to keep you safe while I gathered evidence. Webb's been running illegal auctions for 2 years, selling people who were already free, taking their land when they disappeared. Morrison's hand went to his gun belt. You got proof of that? Constance pulled a leather satchel from her saddlebag. Names, dates, bank records, testimony from 3 other families he destroyed. Why didn't you tell us? Hope's voice was barely a whisper. Because if Webb suspected what I was doing, he would have killed you all to cover his tracks. Mercy stepped forward. Her healer's instincts read exhaustion in Constance's face. How much time do we have? None. Federal marshals are riding here, now. Webb convinced them you're planning some kind of uprising. They'll arrest everyone and sort out the truth later. Grace looked at Jonah. How far away? Half a day, maybe less. The group stood in silence. 6 months of building something good, and it could all end in chains and courtrooms. We could run, Hope said. We could hide, Mercy added. We could fight, Jonah said quietly. Constance shook her head. Webb's got 12 men with him, plus the federal marshals. Fighting means dying. Grace walked to the edge of the porch. She looked out over the land they had worked to improve. The school. The gardens. The place where broken people had started to heal. Or we could do something none of them expect. She turned back to the group. Her teacher's mind had found a solution. We face this in public, all of it. Let the whole territory decide what kind of place they want to live in. Jonah stared at her. That's suicide. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way to win. Constance opened her satchel and spread documents across the porch table. Evidence of Webb's crimes laid out like cards in a poker game. I've got enough here to destroy him. But only if we can get it to the right people before he destroys us. Morrison studied the papers, his lawman's eyes scanning dates and signatures. This is solid evidence, but you need a federal judge to make it stick. The territorial governor's coming to Redemption Creek tomorrow for the Christmas social, Hope said. He brings a federal judge with him for land disputes. Grace smiled for the first time in days. And I'm making his wife's dress for the occasion. The plan formed like storm clouds gathering. Dangerous, necessary, their only real chance. Webb thinks he's got us cornered, Grace said, but cornered animals can still bite. That night they worked by lamplight. Constance copying documents, Hope finishing the governor's wife's dress, Mercy preparing medical supplies for whatever came next. Jonah sat on the porch, cleaning his rifle. Not for war, but for the kind of peace that sometimes required the threat of war to maintain. At dawn, riders appeared on the horizon. Too many riders, coming fast. Webb had arrived with his federal marshals and his hired guns. Time had run out. Grace stepped beside Jonah, on the porch, her face calm as still water. You ready for this? Jonah stood, checked his gun, looked at the 3 sisters who had changed his life by letting him change theirs. Let's find out what we're really made of. The riders came closer. Dust rose, like smoke signals. In 24 hours, everyone in the territory would know what happened at the Rourke Ranch. Whether they lived to tell the story themselves was another question entirely. The town square of Redemption Creek had never seen a crowd like this. 3 years after the auction in Desert Wells, half the territory had come to witness whatever Jonah Rourke was planning to announce. Webb stood near the front with 2 federal marshals and a handful of hired guns. His face carried the satisfaction of a man who thought he had already won. Sheriff Morrison positioned himself between the crowd and the makeshift platform. His hand rested easy on his gun, but his eyes stayed alert. The territorial governor sat in a place of honor with his wife, who wore Hope's finest dress. Federal Judge Harrison sat beside them, drawn by promises of resolving a significant land dispute. Grace, Mercy, and Hope stood on the platform beside Jonah, 3 women who had traveled from slavery to ownership in the span of 3 years. Their presence alone told a story that made some people uncomfortable. Jonah stepped forward. The crowd fell silent. You all want to know what I did with the Hammond sisters after I bought them 3 years ago? Well, here's your answer. He pulled out a folded document. The crowd leaned forward. I'm giving them my entire ranch. All 10,000 acres, the cattle, everything. Chaos erupted. Webb's men moved closer to the platform. The marshals stepped forward. Judge Harrison raised his hand for order. That's impossible, Webb shouted. Those women are still property. Their freedom papers are forged. Constance stepped out from the crowd. She had been waiting for this moment. Your Honor, I'm Constance Hammond, working undercover for the Freedmen's Bureau. I have evidence that Mr. Webb has been conducting illegal auctions and forging slavery documents for 2 years. She handed a thick folder to Judge Harrison. The federal judge opened it, scanning pages of carefully documented evidence. Webb's face went pale. She's lying. This is all fabricated. Bank records don't lie, Mr. Webb, Judge Harrison said. Neither do witness testimonies from 12 different families. The marshal nearest Webb suddenly looked uncertain. This was not the simple arrest he had been promised. Jonah held up the document he had been carrying. This isn't a deed transfer. It's an arrest warrant for the Hammond sisters, issued on false charges. He tore the warrant in half. But it doesn't matter anymore, because they already own the ranch. Grace stepped forward. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had taught children to read and think for themselves. We purchased the Rourke Ranch legally over the past 3 years. Mr. Rourke was our business partner, not our owner. Hope opened a leather case filled with official documents, bills of sale, property transfers, bank statements, all properly witnessed and recorded. Mercy added quietly, We haven't been slaves for 3 years. We've been landowners. The crowd murmured. This was not the story they had expected to hear. Webb pushed through his men. This is ridiculous. These people can't own land. It's against the natural order. Judge Harrison looked up from Constance's evidence folder. His face had gone grim. Mr. Webb, according to these documents, you've been selling free citizens into slavery and stealing their property. That's a federal crime punishable by 20 years in prison. The federal marshals stepped toward Webb instead of the Hammond sisters. The hired guns looked at each other uncertainly. They had been told they were stopping criminals, not protecting one. Sheriff Morrison moved forward with iron shackles. Marcus Webb, you're under arrest for human trafficking, land fraud, and conspiracy. Webb's world collapsed in the space of a heartbeat. His hired guns melted away into the crowd. His political connections suddenly seemed very far away. This isn't over, Rourke. Yes, it is. As Webb was led away in chains, the crowd began to disperse. Some looked disappointed. They had come expecting drama and gotten justice instead. Governor Patterson approached the platform. His wife's dress drew admiring glances from the other women present. Miss Hope, my wife tells me you're accepting commissions. Yes, sir. We'll need to discuss expanding your business to the territorial capital. Judge Harrison shook hands with each of the sisters. What you've accomplished here is remarkable. A fully integrated community that actually works. Grace nodded toward Jonah. We had help from someone who believed in doing the right thing. The judge studied Jonah's weathered face. What will you do now, Mr. Rourke? Work for them. They'll need a good ranch foreman. And you're qualified for that position? They seemed to think so. 5 years later, the Redemption Creek Academy graduated its first class of 18 students. Apache children sat next to white children sat next to Mexican children. All of them ready for lives their parents could never have imagined. Hope's dress shop employed 12 seamstresses and filled orders from San Francisco to St. Louis. Her designs appeared in fashion magazines back east. Mercy ran the Territorial Health Service from her clinic in Redemption Creek. She had trained 6 other healers to serve communities across Arizona. Grace's academy drew students from across the Southwest. Parents traveled hundreds of miles to enroll their children in a school that judged ability instead of ancestry. Jonah worked the ranch with quiet satisfaction. The angry cowboy had disappeared somewhere along the way, replaced by a man who had learned the difference between owning something and belonging to it. A wagon appeared on the horizon one morning. A family of freed slaves from Texas, looking for the place they had heard about where anyone could start over. The 3 sisters stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching the wagon approach. Jonah stepped out of the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. Grace looked at her sisters, then at Jonah. The choice was the same as it had always been. Turn away or step forward. Close the door or open it wider. The wagon pulled up in front of the house. A man, a woman, and 3 children climbed down. Dust-covered and travel-worn, but carrying themselves with the dignity of people who had survived too much to give up now. The youngest child looked up at Jonah with eyes full of defiance and fear. A girl, maybe 10 years old, clutching a worn doll against her chest. We don't need your pity, mister. Jonah smiled for the first time in the entire story. Good. I wasn't offering any. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.